my name is Sandra Slotte, and I work at Akada University of Applied Sciences as Head of Sustainable Career Support. It's a new title, and therefore I'm stumbling a little bit. I've been working at Akada for about 12 years, and it's a small Swedish-speaking University of Applied Sciences in Helsinki in Finland. And being Swedish, it sets us apart a little bit from many other universities in Finland, and also we are one of the most international universities of applied sciences here. And we have people from around 60 different countries, and we're quite, the percentage there is quite high, so we have a lovely diverse staff and student body there. Before that, I've been working in the higher education sector for a long time. I've also been in competence development. I've been in recruitment of young students and young professionals. I have an educational background as a master's in adult education from Helsinki University, but I also did my major at Aalto at that time, in then leading and developing the learning organization. You'll have to fix the transcribation there. And also some economics at Hanken. I also studied abroad in Salamanca in Spain, where I studied communications, and then I've been, dabbling in social psychology and stuff like that. So it's a broad range. And also at Akada, I have gone from communications and marketing in the beginning onto kind of a new role as of 2017, when Finland introduced the tuition fees for non-EU foreigners. And that took me into this whole spin of internationalization, basically. So although I've lived abroad myself several times, and I love speaking in English, I love meeting new people from different backgrounds and so on. So I've always had this interest for internationalization, but this is where it became kind of this professional focus on it. And so my first task was basically to find out how to recruit students when suddenly we introduced fees for what had been free before. And so that got me into the whole student journey thinking, which is a lot of, it's service design, it's the same as customer journeys, going through admissions funnels and so on and so forth, and then, pinpointing student recruitment, marketing areas and countries and so on. And then that kind of evolved. I was also in charge of the quality measures, in a sense, where we have these surveys. There are national surveys connected to all higher education institutions in Finland, which in turn connect to their funding. And so we survey all who are about to graduate and also all who have graduated 5 years ago. And these, we can then follow kind of the student satisfaction and how they feel about the quality of their education and how it takes them into their careers and so on. So that's been really, really interesting. And in 2017, a lot of Finnish higher education institutions, but only 2 universities of applied sciences, chose to conduct this private survey, which is called the iGraduate Student Barometer or International Student Barometer, where we surveyed the international students. And that then gave us a lot of information about both our exchange students and our international degree students and their satisfaction with their degree in Finland. And so now we're still using all of this data, which is widely available, and we're using that then to kind of improve our quality internally. And I got excited about something called internationalization at home. So far in higher education, you've been looking at mobility, because mobility is something easy to define, it's easy to measure, and basically mobility had been internationalization of higher education previously. But the fact is that in many countries, you would have around, the maximum is around 20% of your students that would go abroad. And that's pretty much the same for Akada, for example. But then again, in many countries, you have a lot less. So on a global scale, you might have just between 1% and 5% of your students going abroad. And then research was able to connect going abroad or having intercultural interactions, meaningful intercultural interactions with other people, as being connected to developing soft skills. And as you know, soft skills are being sought after a lot more now by employers. And when these could be connected, then basically if global competencies and soft skills are developed very well through intercultural interactions, and you have 1 to 5, and in best case scenario, 20% of your students going abroad and having these interactions, then basically you would have something between 80 and 95% of your students not getting those crucial skills. And so that became a real problem. And so globally, higher education institutions realized that, whoops, we really need to do something about the rest of the students. We need to be able to internationalize them at home, because they might not have the possibility to go abroad. They might not afford it, or they have commitments at home, or just some other reasons. So this was up and coming already before, and this is then connected to research that was done in Australia around internationalization of the curriculum. How can you use those international students you have at home to help internationalize your local students, and then at the same time kind of get your international students settled in locally and having these networks and contacts. So it would be mutually beneficial for everybody. But then also getting that into the curriculum, because if you kind of make that a voluntary thing, then people won't find the time, or there's something else coming up and so on. So you would really need to get that into curriculum. And also, instead of just thinking about teaching whatever subject in a local setting and saying, well, this is what you would do here, then giving those students the kind of the capacity to understand their own field also on a global scale. So it's internationalizing the curriculum. So you had internationalization at home in Europe, you had internationalization of the curriculum in Australia, and then US and UK are also obviously as receiving countries very much on top of the internationalization agenda. And then COVID happened. And so, all of these things that had just started to become a kind of a debate and a real big discussion, and many had put them into their strategies. Many national internationalization strategies had them mentioned, but nobody really knew exactly how to do it yet. And so putting them online, basically, and doing virtual things was already a topic, but then boom, since everybody went online everywhere in the world and nobody went anywhere, very few people studied abroad and so on, then this has become a real hot topic now. At the same time, from the business life, you have the kind of the focus on the soft skills, which is increasing rapidly. And we know for a fact that with AI and automation and so on, what sets us apart from that is the soft skills, and that soft skills intensive industries are really now on the rise. But kind of an additional thing to that is that there's this skills gap, because soft skills are so hard to assess. So when a company wants to recruit people with soft skills, first they would have to define what soft skills they really need and identify what that would bring. Then they would have to articulate them in their job postings and so on. At the same time, research shows us that people don't put their own soft skills in their LinkedIn profiles or in their CVs, because they don't really think about them, and they're hard to measure. So if somebody asked me, how do I know if I have good communication skills? That's a really good question. How do you know? How do you rate them? Language skills, you would say you're basic, you're intermediate, you're fluent. What do you do about communication skills or emotional intelligence? So there's kind of this huge need now for soft skills, but both the companies and the talents need to figure out what soft skills they need, what skills they have, and then find each other and be able to kind of talk about these. So what's happening in the recruitment field is that all these kind of psychological tests are being developed to help recruiters actually find those soft skills through structured interviews or through other tests, but they are usually very expensive. So you would have a license that a big company could afford, but in Finland, 95% of the companies are small and medium-sized. So they won't probably be able to afford these kind of assessment tests, and that puts a lot of pressure on that person who would be then hiring. So there's a lot of different things kind of all interconnected. So this started off as, who are you and what's your educational background? It flowed into, well, this is why I'm interested in internationalization and how it affects education and work, because they're all very much interconnected. So it's actually a very simple definition in the sense that globalization are all those forces that are happening in the world. Pre-COVID, you would travel a lot more, growing middle classes that could afford to travel, that would go abroad. They would send their kids to school abroad. Economics that are international and in kind of their own sense. Research is being international and so on. So all these global forces with movement of people, of economics and so on. And then internationalization is how we respond to globalization. So globalization is something that is happening, and internationalization is something that we're doing to handle that globalization. So internationalization is what an organization, an educational institution, a company, whatever would do to be able to operate better in that globalized world that we have. And so in a sense, what I would say there is that because we are, the globalization is happening, and at least pre-COVID, everybody was moving a lot more. Well, now everything's moved online. But you have digital nomads and so on, and probably won't stop moving. We won't stop traveling. We will for a while, but then it will probably pick up again. But also we will be doing a lot more stuff online, but that will still be global because we will be doing it across countries and borders. We are also facing, these wicked problems such as climate change and poverty and racism and so on. And these are very, very complex, big challenges. And not one person, not one country, not one unit can solve them, but we need a lot of people coming together to solve these really, really big issues together. Also, things are becoming more interconnected. So there's a lot more going on in networks because nobody can fix this on their own, and they have to find those other people and units that could help them solve whatever issue. So you have, on a global scale, you would have kind of the wicked problems and the UN SDGs as one way of defining them. But also locally, you would have whatever problems you have in your industry or in your company, but you would also need, for example, you would need specialized talent from somebody, or you would need consultation from somewhere, or partners, funding, and so on. And so everything is very much interconnected. So everything is just so much bigger, so much faster, so much change, and so much interconnectivity. So you can't really stay in your bubble as you have been before. And careers are no longer, staying at one company for 40 years. But you keep changing. You might have multiple employers. You might do, the whole gig economy. You might live in Estonia and work part-time in Sweden and Uganda. And all of this is changing so much. And so internationalization, the activities that you would kind of do at an organization needs to adapt to this. So you need to find those communication channels. You need to find those networks. You need to find you need to create rules that allow for this. So for a country, you would need the migration rules to be adaptable. So for example, for the digital nomads, how do you do taxation for them? Or immigration permits, and who would be let in for what period of time for doing what, and how is that followed up? That takes us into the whole kind of integration issue, and remembering that it's a two-way street, because oftentimes we talk about integration as in, what are we supposed to require from others trying to enter our country? But what are they supposed to require from the country they're entering into? You can't just, then it becomes assimilation if you just have one group kind of packed into a bigger group and then you're done. And we all know that doesn't really work. And then you come into this diversity and inclusion thing, which you mentioned, where we've gone from talking about integration as kind of you come here and you adapt to our way, into inclusion, where we include all the people involved in the decision making, in the creation of the culture, keeping kind of those things that are specific to a culture, but being able to and willing to also adapt to the other people coming in, where you evolve as a country, you evolve as a culture. You can't keep it static anyway. And then you have the sense of belonging, which would maybe be then one step further from inclusion. You have the whole equality and equity discussion, where at least in Finland, it's been quite usual to talk about equality, where we're very strong on kind of saying, well, hey, we offer the same thing for everybody, and that's fair. It's just that people have different needs, different abilities, different possibilities. And so giving the same support to everybody doesn't really work, because some need more support than others. And that's a very big discussion right now, that what is then equity, and how can we support those who need the support the most, so that everybody has a chance of succeeding. They are recruiting internationally, and because of COVID, and they haven't been able to bring those people to the operating country, then they have to have these onboarding systems remotely. And many companies have been able to develop kind of a system where they would introduce the person to the company. And as with a company culture, you would like, obviously, most of the times at least, to have these people coming on board and also learning something about that company culture, what it is to work there. You would need to kind of at least inform them of stuff like what time we usually have meetings, in which way do we have meetings, do we have coffee breaks together just to informally meet, being on time, very kind of typical intercultural issues that you would have been dealing with physically before, and you have to deal with them online now. And it's kind of the same thing I feel with a national culture. Yes, you can work remotely, you can sit in Uganda and work in Estonia, but you might still need to know something about the Estonian way of working. and additionally something about the company that you are working for. And this, I mean, you can't completely, I mean, you have people right now in different countries have not been integrated, have not been, included, and do not understand the local culture. So you will always have those different degrees of, some people having become more included and some people having become less included. Online obviously makes it even harder, but this is kind of a new situation where everybody needs to find out how to do that. And in education, what they've been doing is this online collaboration. So it's called COIL or virtual exchange, or they have different names for it. But the point that they're driving there through research is that it needs to be a meaningful interaction. So having students from Finland and Germany just sit together and do something is not in itself necessarily a learning experience. But if it is prepared beforehand and it's facilitated during, and then again, self-reflection afterwards, then you can actually extract those soft skills that are developed through this interaction, which is kind of the point. And also obviously the networking, because as globalization is happening and internationalization is being done, global networks, international networks are also increasing. And specifically in the Nordic countries where jobs are very much found through networks and through the hidden job market. 70% of all the jobs in Finland are on the hidden job market, which means you'll never ever see a job ad, but you have to know somebody who knows somebody. And of course, if you are a foreigner and you come into a new country, you don't have those networks. And in COVID, you won't create those networks physically, but you have to create them online. And so, platforms like LinkedIn are again seeing a surge in people using that for networking, because we're talking a lot more about networking. And we're realizing that the nationals, the locals would need to open up their networks to the internationals. And I think that's going to be kind of a breaking point, because, networks are power. So if I have networks, then I can tap into them. Why would I open my network to you? And then you might be fighting with my kid or with myself when I look for a job. And what if you're better? So people are going to be hesitant to open up their networks unless they realize that, okay, but if I open my network to you, then you might open your network to me. And one day I might need your network. You might never have used mine, but I might use yours. And so we just need to find this, the kind of the point where we all realize that it's mutually beneficial to get to know each other, to understand the differences, to understand that there are differences and that doesn't have to be a bad thing, and that differences aren't better or worse, but they're just different. And all these intercultural competencies, and again, the soft skills in communication across culture, the emotional intelligence, where I can understand that, even if you have this certain facial expression, in your culture, this might be completely different. You might not mean what I think you mean, because I'm used to everybody using this expression for a certain thing. And I won't be able to learn what everybody in every culture in the world uses their facial expressions for. But I will be a bit more sensitive to the fact that it might not be what I think. I might be more open and willing to ask you, I'm sorry, but can you tell me how you feel? Because I'm not really sure about what this is. And so just being, having these intercultural dialogues is something that is being talked about a lot, because this is how we kind of get under each other's skin and get to know each other and realize that our way might not be the best way or the only way. And being, open to failure, being open to discussion, saying, okay, I failed. I was an idiot. I shouldn't behave like that. Thank you for letting me know. Now we can move on. And so I think that just this interpersonality, because as I said, when you have AI and you have automation and everything that is really quick and simple and kind of repetitive, and you can do that within a second, that will be taken over by machines. What will set us apart from machines, and really where the jobs will be, is this interpersonal connection. So that's what we have to become really good at. And whether it is online or not, this is what we have to be good at. And obviously, because of the situation right now, having all these online versions of it is extremely essential. And we all have to get with that program as well. And it's a lot to take in. And resilience was what I felt the word of 2020. Everybody was talking about resilience, resilient people, resilient organizations, resilient internationalization even. Because everybody realizes that there's just too much going on right now. There's so much going on. There's so much change. And we see that people aren't feeling well. especially Generation Z is feeling really bad. Well-being is coming into it. We realize that we have to take care of each other because otherwise we won't pull through. We're human beings, and the evolution is slower than this, and all the changes are happening faster and faster, and we can't cope. So we really need to look into how people are feeling and how we can support each other in this. And that affects everything. It affects companies, it affects education, it affects integration, and all of it. And we just, we have to do this together. And I think that, in a sense, because of companies operating in global environments, even if it's a small family company in Peraheke, you would still probably at some point have an international customer, or use international products, or having to do something that is connected internationally to something else. And that's, the minimal scale. And then you have everything, bigger than that in addition. So if the economy and the jobs and the life you lead and the society is all affected by globalization, and you're internationalizing these to cope with that, and education is supposed to kind of prepare you for this. So throughout your education, you are being prepared for life in a society or several societies. You're prepared to go on to higher education or to start working. And again, if all those settings, if the world is global and the workplace is globalized and the education system is globalized or internationalized, then you have to do that as well. And so education is then designed to prepare you for that. And so that is how it affects education in a sense. So I think that we've just evolved very fast, very quickly, and now everything is really being affected by globalization. And so all those very traditional local systems, whether they are organizations or companies or schools or attitudes and individuals, we're all more and more being affected by globalization. And therefore, we all have to have the skills and competencies to internationalize.